So maybe just to introduce myself, my name is Pierre. I'm French. You can hear it in my accent. Sorry for that. Um, I'm based in the south of France, and I'm the CEO of Searoutes, which is a carbon emission data provider for logistics and more. Um, I have Graham with me. That's the CEO of Ship Angel. Really happy to have you on board, Graham. Um, Graham and I have known each other for a few years now. Ship Angel, maybe for the disclosure, is actually one of our customers at Searoutes, but we're not going to talk about this. So it's maybe slightly awkward to start the webinar, but we were both in Long Beach last week at TPM, which happened to coincide pretty much with the start of the war in Iran. And so I thought it would be great to get Graham to debrief the event and have a laid-back conversation on what it felt like for him, and talk about all the good stuff that were at TPM this year. So maybe, Graham, maybe to kick it off, maybe people don't know Ship Angel, so maybe you can give us a little bit about your background and what's Ship Angel.
Thanks for having me, Pierre. Great to be here. Hey everybody. My name is Graham Parker. I'm CEO and co-founder at Ship Angel. Previous to that, I was CEO and co-founder of a company called Containers with a K, containers.com. We built a bunch of platforms for the shipping lines and freight forwarders. We built Ship Maersk Line, O&E, Zim, Siva, Daxter Toll, a bunch of other ones. Now in this journey at Ship Angel, we are building a suite of software products exclusively for BCO shippers. So from rates to bookings, spot procurement, invoice audit, PO management, all in a modular-based system. That's a high level.
That's great. I mean, from some of the questions or some of the discussions we've had, you've called Ship Angel kind of the OS, for the operating system for freight, which has always struck with me. Nowadays, sorry, I'm gonna tangent this right away on tech maybe, but I don't know which browser you use. Maybe you use Arc. You've heard of Arc,
yes.
This browser. So it's like, it's a little bit like it becomes your OS as well for all your programs are now suddenly in your browser. You don't need any app on your laptop. So I kind of think about Ship Angel this way. It's kind of like you get this one app and then you're able to do all these great things that you need to execute for all the freight. And so I think it's exactly the right way to frame it.
Definitely. I mean, OS is, as you say, it's a quite a wide term these days, Pierre, but I definitely think the world that we live in, and we start talking about TPM in a second, we'll go into all of the events that seem to just happen before TPM kicks off.
Yeah.
So trying to manage a global supply chain in 2026, super difficult. There's no such thing as calm and normal. There's just always events. So trying to create this kind of single browser tab, as you eloquently put it, to kind of try to do everything you can in one place, I think has huge benefits. Yeah,
it's great. You stole my line from a little bit afterwards, but I have to take you the word. Every year at TPM, it's a little bit like uncertainty is the new uncertainty. I think there was a conference panel or something, a discussion on how this year is the new normal is uncertainty and stuff. And it feels like it's like this at every year, every TPM, every year. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they canceled it right from, I think it was just in the middle of COVID, whatever. And then since then, it feels like every year there's a new thing, right? So maybe just background, TPM started March 1st, I think, March 1st. And what they called Operation Epic Fury was February 28th, right? So the day before. So the beginning of the conference totally coincided with the beginning of the war in the Middle East. And what happened pretty much in the 48 hours right after this, all the major carriers, CMA, Hapag, Maersk, they all suspended their transits in the Strait of Hormuz almost immediately, and we didn't see any spike on the freight rates during the conference. But maybe for background, that conference is when, now I'm realizing that I'm doing all the talking, the questions coming for you. But this TPM is the conference where BCOs and ocean carriers usually negotiate their tender. A lot of people were at the end of this negotiation cycle, so they had their rates locked in, and suddenly this happens. So everybody was on the, was shaky. So I don't know, like, what was your feeling kind of walking the event at the beginning of, with this happening the day before, and you started talking to BCO, and they were going through their tenders? Like, what was kind of the feeling, and how did they perceive all this?
Yeah, it was so interesting, and like you say, Pierre, it's kind of becoming a bit of a an event pre TPM. I remember landing in Long Beach. I think it might have been the 28th of February or 27th of February in 2020, on a Sunday evening, and going through the airport and seeing a few people that I knew going the opposite direction. I was like, what is going on? I didn't realize it had just been cancelled, and obviously that was COVID. And then we had the whole kind of the Suez another year. We had the Red Sea, Ukraine war, tariffs were the talk of last year. And now, as you said, like literally a few days beforehand, we have this situation in the Middle East that's obviously gotten worse even since. But I think shippers are genuinely concerned. Like every when I arrive in Long Beach, every breakfast, lunch and dinner is already mapped out with multiple customers, so you get such an interesting kind of view by the time you leave on Wednesday evening. But it was clear that a lot of shippers were, I wouldn't say excited about this year's tenders, but felt pre this happening that the freight rates were going to be in a decent spot from a shipper perspective. And they had been trending down quite a bit over the previous quarters. And I think as depending on who you are, where you are in your bid cycle, bid 2, bid 3, bid 4 even, a lot of folks felt they were just at the finish line, and then this happened, and it felt like to an extent all bets could be off. Would the shipping lines decide that bids needed to be kind of restarted, most likely at a much higher rate, or were they prepared to kind of go and finish the contracts? And even if that did happen, when we think back to those dark COVID years, does it mean that we're going to end up with contracts being torn back up, emergency surcharges being written into them left, right, and center? So you could see the pain on a lot of shippers' faces, and kind of this huge veil of uncertainty kind of hitting the supply chain yet again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We met, so like you, we had like lunch and dinners booked, and so we met a lot of shippers that were at the end of their bidding cycle, really. Some of them were just about to sign, and how tedious that is, right? Like several rounds, you have to agree, allocate volume. It's like multi-parameter optimization. It's a complicated problem to solve. Then this hits, and so what's going to happen? Are the rates going to change? Is the ocean carrier going to say, no, we stop, we're, like you're saying, we resume as square one? Or it's something of the form, all right, we're going to use the rates that we agreed on and these volumes and stuff, but down the line, you're going to see that surcharge, that's coming from us not being able to meet what we said would meet in the contract, whether it's a fuel surcharge or routing surcharge or emergency surcharge or whatever. Do you think like there's ocean carriers that will add this like in the middle of the year?
Yeah, I think if you look back at the pre-COVID years, the freight rates were pretty steady over that kind of 2000 to 2020 range. They kind of moved up and down within, on the Trans-Pacific, maybe a low of 1,500 to a high of like 2,832 or something. And then COVID came, and we had this just incredible explosion of freight rates. We all heard horror stories of people paying, I remember the one that always sticks out in my head was $25,000 for a hike from Ningbo to New York. And I think it kind of like the carriers obviously had, the most successful periods in their entire history, but I guess it also kind of placed an understanding in their heads that when things happen, if rates do have to go up, that sometimes shippers don't have a choice but pay. And I think, that one shipper that I was thinking about when I made my last comment really stuck with me. They said, I'm not sure what's worse, whether I have to go back to the negotiating table and I end up paying higher rates, or whether I get my deal done and I have this, feeling that, is it going to last to 12 months? Am I going to get hit with emergency surcharges like I did during COVID? Because, what's clear is that we don't know what's going to happen in the days and weeks ahead. How is it going to continue to affect the carriers? And again, as we all know from a COVID perspective, the knock-on effects are just extreme in our industry. You have ships not being able to transit, you have empties being out of place at the wrong time. All of that drives kind of chaos in the carrier supply chain. And then the downstream effect, I think, is that it hits all the shippers.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Is there like strategies you recommend the shippers that you talk to? Is it like, allocate
Yeah,
a certain number of your volume now and then keep like a certain amount for like spot? And then maybe with this you can linearize, or like you can make sure to get the best of both rates in a way. Is there
yeah,
like a
great.
strategy there?
Yeah, great question. I mean, our first product in Shipping Angel was a rate system, and I think the reason it's been so successful really is the period post-COVID, because I think the pain on the shippers post-COVID is kind of real, and I think in a lot of cases it left a lot of scars. And what we've seen almost across the board is that, if you were like a typical BCO might have 2 or 3 VOCCs and 2 or 3 NVOCCs, and in a post-COVID world they might want 4 or 5 of each, to make sure that they can get the coverage that they want and need and give them some comfort.
Yeah.
Because again, coming out of COVID, we saw surcharges just, escalate quite dramatically across the majority of the major trade lanes. And the other thing we saw, besides that, is the carrier or the vendor increase, is that you probably want, more of a mix, to your point, Pierre, in that, maybe 2017, 2018, it was 80% in an annual contract, 20% between spot and short term. We see a lot of BCOs now looking at smaller commitments on annual deals. So it could be something like 50% in an annual contract, 25% in short-term NVOCC contracts maybe, and then often up to 25% in the spot market, to try and kind of give them some sort of semblance of control, depending on the chaos we're in for in the next couple of quarters.
Yeah, it really feels like it depends on if you think rates are gonna go up or down, right? Like if you think they're gonna go up, you want to lock all your prices now. If you feel like they're gonna go down, you want to leave the opportunity to catch some of that downward price, right? So it's kind of like, what is your view of the market type thing, right?
Exactly. And I think the feeling with a lot of BCOs is that, if they sign up, let's just pick a number, 2,500 Shanghai to Long Beach, and if the spot market's up at $3,500, they feel they're in a great position and they've got their price locked in, everything's good. But if this situation was to continue in the Middle East for a prolonged period of weeks and months ahead, and the spot market was to go to, let's say, $5,000, does that mean that your $2,500 contract rate stays intact? Are you going to get your full commitment every week? Are you open to an emergency peak season, an emergency surcharge? Does your $2,500 rate become $3,500? Do you not get the allocation? Do you have to go back out to spot? It's so difficult from a BCO perspective.
Yeah. So you want that layer to abstract all this, hence the OS. Tomorrow we'll be able to talk to somebody, or just even voice, I don't know, and that will do all that for us. But we'll get into that. We'll get into AI a little bit. I dropped the magic word already. But before we go there, I just want to stay on rates for a little bit. Obviously, rates going up. You were just saying like 25,000 Ningbo to New York during COVID. That's a crazy data point. When you take that and you try to price in carbon on top of it, carbon becomes such a small piece of the whole freight rates. So from where I sit, where obviously we do a lot of, we help shippers managing reduce their carbon. One of the ways to get them to act on their carbon strategies to try to price carbon. And obviously, the higher the freight rate, the lower, respectively, the carbon is, and so the less importance to that. So that's one thing that we've had funny conversations with at TPM is like, how do I price carbon? How do I see it in my P&L at the end of the year? So the obvious piece to this is everything that goes in and out of Europe. There's a tax on it called the EU ETS, and the ocean carriers add that surcharge. It's one of the many. Probably we'll have one due to what's going on at the moment, the situation in the Middle East, but the ETS is one of those. And it's even at a really high price per ton of carbon, even at like $200 per ton of carbon ETS, it's still in the 200, 300 range. So it's almost invisible. So I wonder if you've had these conversations, or if carbon came up during TPM at all, because I know you guys integrate this next to your rates, and if that's some conversations that you've had around this.
Yeah, definitely. One of the most exciting things about the Ship Angel journey for me, Pierre, has been, moving from building companies in Europe to now building a company in the US, and being in New York and being in the US. It's so interesting. The BCO market is just enormous, and we're lucky to have kind of customers right across the range. And one of the things that we tried to do with rates was, as you said, we'll talk about the AI later, but we used AI to read rates. But then, we want to give customers a UI UX where they can understand and help make the best decision for every single shipment. And sometimes that's comparing the prices they have, like the latest prices with all the actual surcharges. Other times it could be transits. I need a 27-day transit, not the 37-day option. And then a lot of times as well as like, okay, if price isn't important, sometimes the CO2 emission profile is different. And if you're looking at 5 prices from Shanghai to Long Beach, as we show that, some customers are amazed at the price difference. And particularly the reason I mentioned US here is some US retailers and large global electronic manufacturers have done just an amazing job with utilizing CO2 within their global supply chain. I mean, one probably famous example is Apple. I think it was the Watch Series 9 was their first ever carbon neutral product. And
when they did campaign.
Yeah, and when they did the keynote, it was so funny. I'm a big Apple fan, and I watched the keynote, and they used the word ocean freight 4 or 5 times, because a lot of the reason they could make that watch carbon neutral was because they moved it from air freight to ocean freight.
Fair enough.
And being able to kind of showcase that to customers and say, this is a big reason, and this is a big goal to be able to make a carbon neutral product, to be able to reduce your CO2 by so much. And for platforms like ours, it's being able to take great data from you guys and be able to showcase it and show it to a customer. It could be, I've got a 20 pallet shipment from Sydney to New York. You don't need to possibly move all 20 pallets by air. What if you were to move 6 by air and 14 on a fast ocean service, and you can see this the combined CO2 benefit of doing that versus just moving them all 20 by air, which would have been the traditional model. So definitely, I feel like a lot of companies are kind of emulating these big brands that have had success with not just taking a product and making it carbon neutral. That's one great example, but another one is at a business level, a Fortune 1000 brand saying, this is the level of CO2 we want to save this year. How can our global supply chain help us? And they're good examples, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of operational challenges with this, right? Because I guess the air freight is just in time. That is, you order, you get in 3 days or whatever. If you put everything on ocean, like on ocean freight, on vessels, you have to plan stock a little bit ahead, and where are you going to need the volumes, and so it takes a lot more preparation. So yeah, I guess that's quite a game changer for sure. But on a CO2 perspective, there's a factor 100, right, between the two. And so that's definitely a great way to reduce your emissions, is to shift volume from air to ocean and tracking this, right? So It probably has an impact on price too. I can imagine
Yeah.
the cost of freight is significantly reduced too. Um, and you
Yeah.
still have to pick the right ocean carriers so that your stuff happens where you need it, when you need it, right? So I guess
Yeah.
schedule reliability is a topic. Maybe we can use your tool
Yeah.
to do that too, right?
Yeah, schedule reliability is huge. It's one of the things that we surface straight away is like, this vendor looked at a 27-day transit time, and then we'll measure that and say, over the last 6 weeks, it's actually been 34 days. And I think schedule reliability is something as an industry, I think we really need to continue to put a lot of effort into. The percentages are not very good on a lot of trade lanes.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, like we said, multi-parameter optimization. This tender, several components to this. Obviously, rates, service reliability, CO2 surcharges, including ETS, which is bound to become like up to 4 or 5% of the freight spent for shippers that are based in Europe and have a lot of volume in Europe. So it's quite a big equation to solve. Hopefully, there's new tools. You've been super public about using modern tools. I'm trying to use the right words because I don't want to use buzzwords too much, but you want to be able to have a great experience for the users to make an arbitrage between these different factors. So how do you think about this in the kind of the modern tech stack of nowadays? How do you think about optimizing these old parameters, and how do you make sure the user has that experience, and make sure that it's not just cosmetics, but that there is real value in the data?
Yeah, it's a great question, Pierre. I think the promise of AI is significant, and I do think that it's going to kind of not just change the world. It's not just change software, but it will change the world. The way I think about it is, people often say, "Oh, is AI going to be as big as the internet?" To me, it's not really a comparison of comparing it to the internet, or even mobiles. It's more like, when we look back in 10 years, I think it's going to be more like comparing it to electricity or fire. Like it's an invention that's going to change everything. So I think for us as software vendors, our goal is to deliver products that have, as you say, Pierre, has actual substance, and it's not just hype, and they can be implemented very quickly and very easily, but they add very, very clear value. And and you make them measurable, and you make them really easy. I mean, in a lot of ways, I often think that we at ShipAngel are very, very lucky. We were born in 2023.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. Imagine you had to rebuild containers today. Kind of just sorry, I'm going totally off script, but it doesn't matter. Imagine you had to do this today. It'd be an interesting experiment to rerun, knowing what building it once already first, and then using the tooling of today. Like, how much faster could you rebuild this in today's world? That would be, it's kind of what you're saying. ShipAngel is now born in like recent times and benefit from all of this tooling, which you didn't have access to back in the day. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to take your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think like building products now, like even I remember I spoke at TPM last year, not this year, and I was on a panel with Eric Johnson, and I casually mentioned that 1/3, 33% of our code was been written.
That was last year, right? I remember that panel. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember a lot of people approached me about it, and at the time they were like, "Wow, 33 is high. We're at 0 or 10%." And then I remember annoying our engineers all through the year, and being able to ask them when we were going to hit 70 or 80, and I was driving them crazy. And then second week back in January, the guys were like, something's happened with the models, like it's really changed, and we started to hit like 87, 88%. And one of the kind of outputs that I get, I still do a lot of demos myself, and we have this thing called prototype pipeline. And often I'll give a demo and we have quite a wide range of products, but often the customer will say, I really like that, but I have this very specific request. Like, let's say I would like to see a CO2 dashboard broken out just from my air to ocean shipments. And traditionally you would say, okay, let's take a look at that. Now we go into Claude, we activate the prototype pipeline, and we say, take our dashboard and build this. And in like less than 15 minutes, it gives you a clickable prototype based on your entire Figma design library, your React front end.
Yeah. And your design system, right?
And your design system. So to your point, Pierre, like I think if you extrapolate that out to the end of the year, you'll be able to build products in a fully automated way in 100x the speed we could 5 years ago.
So I think that's exactly the angle. It's not about, hey, there's this new tooling and we're going to build an interface that's different for the client. Like, the way the client interacts with the data. So here, I'll contradict myself in a second when I'm done with my thoughts here, but it's not about like the client has a totally new experience. It's about empowering you guys, so you, Searoutes, whatever, to build products so much faster, to iterate more, so that in the end, the client has exactly what he needs when he needs it. And the cycles are just so much shorter. So, it's funny because in the first waves of models, you saw a lot of these freight tech companies come up with their own prompt interface, and we saw a few, and at TPM last year, actually, we saw a few companies doing this. Obviously, everybody wanted to have their LLMs, and it felt like the novelty was the way to interact with the data. That now you can ask questions. Where is my stuff? When does it arrive? Kind of the same question. What's the CO2 of my shipment? All that stuff. Can I rebook on a different carrier? So forth. But it's not really that interface that needs to change. The new hype about LLM is not just, it's not the interface. It's really just the teams, you guys, building much faster exactly the product that you. So it's really empowering product team, CX teams also to get feedback a lot faster. Sales team to also tackle the right opportunities at the right moment and stuff. So it's really accelerating us all. That's how I read it. Or maybe I'm putting too many words in your mouth, but it's kind of what I get from you.
Totally agree. I mean, building software is going to become kind of, much easier, and everybody will be able to build at speed. It'll be exactly like you say, Pierre. I think it'll be about, can you build something that people want in a very tasteful way, a very unique way, something really great to stand out from the crowd. And I do think that there is a difference between, like, if there was a set of dashboards that you wanted as let's say a large BCO, maybe 2 years ago you might have gone to some vendors and asked them. Now you would probably just get an internal engineer using Claude to kind of build something in a couple of days. I believe that makes a lot of sense. I also believe that it doesn't make sense to like vibe code an international TMS. That's
a good point.
I think that kind of build versus buy thing it's like the narrative is changing a lot. Like you can certainly build a lot more, but kind of like vibe coding your ERP is not going to be a thing, I don't think, in a year or two, even as far as the AI advancements are going to go.
Yeah, look, and there's large TMS that have been there forever and that are, standing the ground despite the many years and the few waves of new tech, right? So, and they seem to not be able to be displaceable, or people can't really move them, right? So,
I mean, you have, a lot of these systems have so many iterations and so many customizations over the years. It's very, very difficult. And like, that's probably a decent example I gave. Like, if you wanted to build a suite of dashboards, you probably don't need to go, you could get an internal team to do it, but you also don't want to be kind of, again, like vibe coding something very, very complicated, because like software does have like hidden costs. Like you have to maintain it, you have to keep it secure, you have to make sure that it stays best in class. Like there's a lot to that too.
Yeah, I think the security one is a big one. Europe is GDPR. Now you're in Dublin right now, so you must know what that means.
Yeah.
And in the US, it's the same. You get ISO standards. There's a lot of data in there that's proprietary. In your case, it's rates and things like that. So, you want to make sure that everything is secure. Now AI tooling still suffers from a couple of scandals that have to do with keys being misplaced and security tokens being out in the wild. So no, you got to be careful with this. What do you think about the whole end of SaaS topic? Because you see this a lot with VCs at the moment. I have to talk about this for a second, but there's the argument goes like this. We've been building interfaces on top of databases, sorry to get technical, forever. And so SaaS is really a set of buttons that allow you to sort and filter and slice and dice a table, if you put it very simply, and then allow you to interact with the data. So now we can do a bit more with agentic AI or whatever. And so all these VCs put out blog posts at the moment saying, well, it's the end of SaaS. Now it's all about agents. You'll be able to display whatever you want, and they'll inform you, and it's all going to be about execution, error handling, exception management, all that stuff, and you won't need to see all your data sets. Do you feel like procurement team will also want that, and you'll see the end of SaaS as well, or do you think like we're safe on the software side for a little bit?
Yeah, I think again, this idea of like AI making software, the democratizing software development, making it easier, faster, cheaper, more accessible. There is a case for, I think there will be a layer of SaaS. Like if you're a thin layer of SaaS, then you could have a challenge. But my personal view is like, I think SaaS will thrive. There's this concept called Jevons paradox, that when you create something in real abundance, that a lot more people can use it, and they will overutilize it. So yeah. I kind of see a world in the 2030s where like, you can just build software so much faster. As you said earlier, the turnaround times will be so much shorter. The barrier to entry will be lower. There'll just be so much more of it. Like if you think about even outside of supply chain for a minute, even inside supply chain, there's so much software that still needs to be built. There's probably decades worth of software products still to be built, and the world we're heading towards at a rapid pace right now, it's going to be so much faster and easier. I think there's a case here that Jevons paradox kicks in, and everybody is building more, and there's just a lot more of it, rather than the kind of the death of SaaS. It enables more SaaS to be built, and a different version of SaaS that's more agentic, but still. Yeah,
you're right. So we're going to see a lot more code being written. That's right. So it's going to be important to try to maintain quality so you don't get dragged into all that noise. I think that's a good point. You were just talking about build versus buy a second ago. I think there was a TPM talk that was on this. It was something about blurring the lines between a build and buy. We've seen, and we talked to a few freight forwarders actually that built their own rates management engine in-house, and there's still a lot of people do this. And so maybe these guys will benefit from that new tech revolution, but maybe you'll see less and less of this, because like you're saying, it's going to become so cheap to find the software that you're looking for being built by somebody else somewhere. Do you know what I mean? So do you think like freight forwarders will still be building their own rate management engine, in the years to come? Or
I think there's definitely a case for it. Like it depends on the complexity. Like freight forwarders are such a wide group. I mean, if you're a let's say a medium-sized forwarder that has 90% exposure on the Transpac in, let's say, Asia Europe, then there could be a case that actually building your own internal rate system that kind of plays to the strengths of those trade lanes, and you can configure it exactly the way you want, might make sense. But if you're global forwarder that has exposure in every single trade lane, and you have 500 users globally, and you go down the road of building something yourself. You know, how many people does it take to build that? How many people does it take to maintain that? How do you know that you're going to be better than the vendor that specializes in doing it, that has a roadmap that's driven by 6 of your competitors?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's definitely use cases where it makes sense to, but I also see a lot of use cases where it makes perfect sense to be working with the best vendor today because, you know, they've got experience, they're going to move even faster. Like this is where I feel you'll see a bit of a divergence. You'll see people kind of drop off in the coming years, but you'll see the best vendors grab this and, like, you know, as you said, Pierre, like it'll help them to move way faster. They'll just become better and better.
Yeah, I think I agree with this. What do you think we could recommend, let's say a VP of ocean freight at a forwarder, or a ocean category manager that's trying to build their own system? Which tech stack can we recommend? What should they look into? So obviously you could say, hey, you know, come to Ship Angel. We got it all. So it's fair enough. That's, you know, I would understand your answer. But let's say they wanted to build it themselves. Like, what would they need to look into? What type of stack would you recommend they use?
For us, again, like I count ourselves very lucky that we were born in 2023. So that did enable us to you know, kind of take advantage of being truly AI native. However, in 2023, when we tackled rates, our first engineer wasn't writing Ruby or React. They were actually looking at a really difficult rate sheet and using ML to try solve it. And we actually became an Anthropic partner back in 2023, one of the very early partners, full stop, super early in supply chain.
That's
and
cool.
Today, when I look at Anthropic, I often think that, like, our company runs at Anthropic. I mentioned earlier, 88 to 91% of our code is written by Claude. Our entire go-to-market strategy is done in co-work, and we use chat every single day. And I'm a big fan of OpenAI too, and I think particularly in the next weeks and months ahead, watch out, they're coming for the enterprise. But today, when you look at the impact that Claude has made on the enterprise, it's unbelievable. If you wanted to do that, I would highly recommend kind of the Anthropic ecosystem of code, married with co-work and of course chat. I think that's a great place to kind of like give you a base of, you know, wanting to build on top, and then without getting too difficult, of course, you'll still need a kind of a tech stack behind it. But Claude Code is just so good. It can kind of one-shot basic apps out of the box almost already.
Yeah, I think it's a great pointer. So, like, if you're a VP of ocean freight or category manager, want to get started with building your own tech stack or your own software, I think definitely looking into Anthropic and connecting it all with different data repository, just to say it very broadly, is the right way to go. And actually, maybe to be totally transparent, you did give me kind of how your tech stack was organized, and it's kind of what triggered me to look into Claude a second time and to get mesmerized with like what it can do. Like that was somehow a bit of a revolution. But the one caveat I'll add to this is, you know, it's great tooling and so forth. You'll also need the data. Data comes into several forms. You also need the schedule, the reliability, the CO2, the blah, blah, blah. So you have to equip yourself with the right API to build on top of that tech stack to be able to build this all. I just want to correct something. Graham just said that we were born in 2023. He meant the firms. He didn't mean us. Obviously, we're a lot older than that, right? So, but you've seen
Ship
this.
Angel was born in 2023. I'm a century older than that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Graham, where can we find you if we found that conversation interesting and we want to learn more about what you just talked about? Where do we find you? Do you like people getting in touch via email, LinkedIn?
Yeah, shipangel.com is a great place. You'll find me on LinkedIn too. I have an AI newsletter there that I talk about a lot of this stuff. But yeah, shipangel.com is a good spot to catch us on.
All right, so we'll go check out your website, and then we'll send you some emails on LinkedIn if we want to know more about what you just talked about. It was a pleasure to have you on this conversation. I think we should do this every week. I think I learned a lot from that conversation, kind of echoed and continued what happened at TPM. There's a lot to unpack in that event for sure. If you want to know more about Searoutes, you can also go to our website on searoutes.com or get in touch with us at LinkedIn. Yeah, it was a pleasure again, Graham. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Really great conversation. Thank you, Pierre.
All right, well, take it easy and we'll see you next time.